Yes, we're going to go ahead and get started. We thank everyone for waiting.
Reconvening at 8:36.
We are, thank you very much. So I'm going to state now that we're back and reconvening tonight's village regular board meeting for the mayor and village board for the village of Woodridge. And I'm going to ask for a motion to reconvene into our regular meeting on this Thursday, June 17th, 2021. A motion, please.
So move, Trustee Krusek.
Thank you, Trustee Krusek. And a second?
Second, Trustee Martinez.
Thank you, Trustee Martinez. And I'm going to ask our clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Krusek. Present. Trustee Martinez.
Present.
Trustee Blair.
Present.
Trustee Kagan.
Present.
Trustee Abbott.
Present.
And of course, Mayor Cunningham.
Present. So the motion carries and we are now in our regular meeting at the exact time of
8:37 p.m.
8:37 p.m. So we're now going to move to our omnibus this evening. Going to ask for a motion to approve item A and acceptance of B through D. Thank you, Trustee Kagan. And a second, please.
Second, Trustee Martinez.
Thank you, Trustee Martinez. Is there a request for any item to be considered separately this evening? Hearing none, I'm going to ask our administrator if you would please read the items that appear on the omnibus agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Cunningham. Members of the board, good evening. Item A is Resolution 2021-58. It's a resolution making a determination relative to the release of executive session minutes pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, November 2020 through May 2021. And items B and C are previous board minutes. The last item D are the accounts payable registers for May 28th and June 4th of 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If our clerk would please call the roll.
Trustee Martinez.
Aye.
Trustee Blair.
Aye.
Trustee Kagan.
Aye.
Trustee Abbott.
Aye.
Trustee Krusek. Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Under presentation of communication and correspondence, and first the mayor's report. Under the mayor's report this evening, I'd like to invite and ask our Chief Cunningham, if he would please share an overview with everyone from his earlier presentation tonight in our board's study session regarding our village overnight parking ordinance and concerns that were shared by some of our neighbors, specifically Carrollwood Lane. Thank you, Chief.
and they get those 3 permissions. This is kind of a graph that shows us where we're at with our chronic parking ordinances by year. And currently, just in that time period, March 1st to June 6th, we've had for 3 unpaid tickets, we have 10 vehicles. For 4 unpaid tickets, we have 1 vehicle, and we have not reached a 5 or more. Some of our problem areas, Mitchell and Roberts Drive is our biggest problem area for overnight parking. 7900 Woodridge Drive is our second biggest area for overnight parking. And then of course, Carrollwood, what we've been talking about, Carrollwood, Deerwood area. So in Carrollwood during that time frame, we had 80 overnight parking requests. We've written 26 overnight parking tickets. And something to note is during that time period, we've had 97 extra patrols by police officers. So that's 97 times in 98 days that police are documented in the area, making sure there's no criminal activity. These are some of the crime stats or calls for service, both on Carrollwood and on Deerwood. There's no real significant crime that are occurring in that area. Most of the contact that we're having is through extra patrols through our police officers. So some of the concerns we talked about today, changing our frontline parking permission that maybe would allow for unpaid parking tickets. They wouldn't get permission to park. We talked about reducing the overnight parking program from 3 allowances to potentially 2. We've talked about reducing the amount of tickets you can get for the chronic violator program from 5 to 3. And we've talked about continuing to monitor our current strategy at this point. We didn't come to any resolutions during today's discussion, but there's going to be more internal discussions between the board. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more information to share at a future time. Are there any questions at this point?
Any board members with any follow-up questions? Thank you very much, Chief. Please thank all of our officers too for their diligence in trying to help with this situation. We appreciate very much. And to our community, we would want everyone to know that it has been 96 days roughly since we passed the new ordinance, and an excessive amount of work has been done. And you can see by our numbers, there's been improvement, but we know we have more work to do. It is a concerning situation for our community and our neighbors and our village board, as well as yourself and the entire police department. So we will continue working together.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Next, wishing everyone in our community a good Juneteenth this Saturday, which is June 19th. It is also known as Freedom Day. Juneteenth is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States. And in honor and recognition of the National Freedom Day, the village will fly the American flag and state flag of Illinois at half-staff in accordance with Governor Pritzker's June 19th proclamation and the governor's signed legislation declaring June 19th an official state holiday. And today, President Biden also signed into, and I want to get the information correct here for everyone. He signed, here we go. He signed a bill establishing Juneteenth, the date marking the end of slavery in the United States, as a federal holiday. And as of today, with this signature in action, Juneteenth, National Independence Day, will become the 12th legal public holiday and the first new one since Martin Luther King Jr. Day was signed into law in 1983 by then President Ronald Reagan. So we wish everyone a good Juneteenth. And next, we're going to ask all Woodridge residents and neighbors to participate in another Community Blue Lights, Blue Ribbons Week to honor and support our Woodridge police officers and all emergency safety first responders. So Woodridge, all you need to do is show your support by please turning on an outdoor blue light or tying a blue ribbon or ribbons outside on your home, and do it with great pride and appreciation and thanks for our Woodridge heroes, our Woodridge Police Department and officers. This will start on Friday, June 25th, and goes through the week of July 4th, and hoping to get as many people involved and go on and support our Blue. So together, let's celebrate Woodridge strong, Woodridge proud, and Woodridge Blue. That is my report for this evening. Administrator Stonich, your report, please.
Thank you, Mayor Cunningham. The first item this evening is item A. It's resolution 2021-59, and it's a resolution to approve certain temporary provisions relating to COVID. Specifically, this allows for such provisions necessary as a result of continuing some of the board's COVID pandemic relief provisions for businesses and restaurants. So including number one, drive-through COVID testing facility, and then as it relates to restaurants or pubs, beer and wine to go, crawlers, growlers to go, carried out mixed cocktails, and also the outdoor dining. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looking for a motion, please, to approve resolution 2021-59.
So moved, trustee Martinez.
Thank you, trustee Martinez. And a second, please.
Second, trustee Krusek.
Thank you, trustee Krusek. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, if our clerk would please call the roll.
Trustee Blair.
Aye.
Trustee Kagan.
Aye.
Trustee Abbott.
Aye.
Trustee Krusek. Aye. Trustee Martinez.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Next item this evening, item B, resolution 2021-60. It's a resolution authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute a certain zoning code update agreement or professional services agreement between the Village of Woodridge and Tesca Associates Incorporated. We have Director Porter this evening who's going to provide you a brief overview of this proposed contract.
Good evening, Mayor, elected officials, and viewing public. Again, I would like to provide you with a brief presentation of tonight's consideration to execute a certain zoning code update, PSA, or professional services agreement between the Village of Woodridge and Tesca Associates Incorporated. To reiterate some of the discussions that was had during our last budget season, why is this update needed? Well, Title IX, the zoning regulations of the code, was enacted in 1976 and has not been reviewed or amended comprehensively since that time. Additionally, this update will focus on portions of this code that are either deficient, outdated, overly complex, inconsistent with federal or state zoning laws, or just unnecessarily inhibit development. The process that's been taken. So staff issued a request for proposals on January 25th, 2021, and that RFP closed on March 1st. The village's selection team was comprised of staff of various departments, reviewed the 7 RFP responses that were received, and we were able to narrow that down to the short list that contained 3, the top firms. The selection team also conducted the interviews to garner the shortlist firms' understanding of the project and the specific needs in their areas of expertise. We also checked all of the references that were provided to obtain insight on what are these other communities, what was their experience with their public engagement approach, how did the elected officials feel and the staff felt with the deliverables that were provided. And I just blanked out. Okay. Sorry about that. And upon review of all this information, Tesca Associates Incorporated, which was a shortlist firm, is the firm that the selection team is bringing forth tonight for consideration. Let's talk about the project briefly. It will contain 4 phases. Phase 1 is project kickoff. Phase 2 is the existing conditions analysis. This phase will also contain the kickoff of the public engagement process. That public engagement and process will include key stakeholder interviews. So that means those that use the zoning code, past developers, those that in my tenure here, people that have constantly talked to me about the zoning ordinance, sometimes residents, but more often than not are developers / business owners trying to garner an understanding of our code. The launch of a project website, which will be maintained by the consultant. All pertinent information in real time will be placed on this particular website and linked to the village's website. Zoning surveys. There's a new twist to zoning surveys, excuse me. The zoning ordinance is extremely technical and jargon filled. and someone like myself, an urban planner, engineers, we know what all that means, but our residents don't. Our business owners don't, most often than not. Director Porter, what does this mean? I can explain something. When you give me my building permit, Director Porter? Well, you got to go through these steps in the zoning ordinance. So a lot of times it's not fancy, it's not exciting, it's not fun. Well, these zoning surveys nowadays, what we're doing, we're taking away from sending these archaic forms that you fill out and fill in. We're going to be using visual preference surveys. So instead of asking someone, hey, how do you feel about the uses in B2 versus B3? And getting, I don't know what the uses are to begin with, Director Porter. What we're going to be doing is using visual preference surveys and photos saying, how does this building fit into the context of your community? What do you want to see along this corridor? And we will be using real-time voting mechanisms via a cell phone. That way, in these public engagement meetings, we'll be able to see real-time voting. People will be able to use their cell phones and do real-time voting, and we can see the tally in front of everybody of what everyone in the room is thinking about. It makes those types of public engagements and outreach much more fun. And for those rare occasions where we may not have someone that has a cell phone, the consulting team as well as staff will be walking around with our own cell phones to make sure that we're able to garner those survey results. And then the standard public house meetings, we'll have several of them that will be built into the scope, that has been built in the scope as well. Phase 3 is drafting of the ordinance, and then phase 4 is the adoption of the code and training. So some quick highlights of these phases. Phase 1 is the project kickoff. This will be a joint meeting with village staff to review our past zoning practices and projects in the village. This is where we review the project scope and the schedule, and the responsibilities and the expectations are going to be set at that point. And then there'll also be a village tour focusing on the sites that reflect typical zoning issues throughout the village. Highlights of phase 2. This is the existing conditions analysis, as well as that public outreach portion that I just spoke about. So we're going to be reviewing our existing code against best practices in applying zoning. There's a legal evaluation of the code, which will be conducted based on compliance with state and federal laws, with attention applied to certain things as signage, religious institutions, and group homes, and other areas where case law directs legally sound standard. And a review of our current development review process. Basically understand, how do I do what I do? Does this make sense to the development community? Does this make sense to residents that from time to time have to seek zoning entitlements for their own respective projects in their respective homes? Phase 3, the exciting part for me, is the drafting of the ordinance with an accompanying changes memorandum. And again, this will just outline all of the key changes in this entire section of the code, which will be provided to staff as a key as we're reviewing these various chapters that are being updated. And once this draft has been compiled, it's going to be posted on our project website, and this at this time will allow additional community review and comment. At phase 4, a next iteration of the draft code is going to be provided to the Plan Commission and presented at a public hearing. There we'll obtain all Plan Commission feedback and additional community feedback, and then all of that will be included in that iteration of the draft. That iteration of the draft will be provided to the mayor and the board of trustees at a future study session, and then further revised with all of your commentary. And then based on that mayor board feedback, that final draft will be prepared for village board review and subsequent study session review, and then hopefully approval. And then after adoption, a training session led by the consultant is going to be provided to show staff, these are the changes, this is what this means. And we're going to also record that training session to provide to some of our developers, business owners, everyone in this room who's interested in understanding and taking a deeper dive into this extremely technical document. The project costs. The TSCA team proposes to conduct the work program presented for a fee not to exceed $95K, and that is inclusive of all staff time and expenses. Anticipated project timeline. If approved tonight, we're getting ready to dig right on in. Starting July 2021, with adoption and training in May of 2022. So an 11-month time frame, which is pretty typical. And that concludes my presentation. I'm here to answer any questions that may be had. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Porter. Appreciate that excellent presentation. Any questions from any board members at this time? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions will follow, though. Thank you very much. Excellent. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve resolution 2021-60.
So moved, trustee Kagan.
Thank you, trustee Kagan. And a second, please.
Second, trustee Krusek.
Thank you, trustee Krusek. Any discussion on this item? If our clerk would please call the roll.
Trustee Kagan,
Aye.
trustee Abbott,
Aye.
trustee Krusek,
Aye.
trustee Martinez.
Aye.
Trustee Blair.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Next item C is ordinance 2021-20. It's an ordinance adopting amended rules and regulations of the Board of Police Commissioners.
Thank you very much, Administrator Stonich. At this time, I'd like to first have a discussion on this item and open it up for the village board members to have a discussion on this ordinance.
Mayor,
Yes, please, trustee Blair.
thank you. I'm aware of the challenges of hiring well-qualified police officers. I served on the Board of Police Commissioners for 17 years, the last 5 years as a chairman, been a member of the Illinois Police Officers Memorial Committee for over 20 years, and has served on the executive board for the last 16 years. I know the reality of what police face. I'm a family survivor, having had a brother that was killed in the line of duty. So I do come to this decision and my conclusion with some background. The reason for the decline in police applications has nothing to do with a 75% score or a 70% score. The demands of a police officer today are more than anyone envisioned even 10 years ago. They enforce the law, but they're also expected to be social workers, psychologists, often administer life-saving measures when they're arriving first on the scene. The technology they work with is more than most of us realize. They're being recorded by people standing by a scene, have cameras on their cars, and have body cameras as part of their required uniform. There's no room for human error or misstep. They're also been demonized. Yet each day, because their professionalism, their knowledge, their dedication, they get up every day and they put their uniforms on. I don't see where this changing this from 75 to 70 is going to make any impact on this at all. You are not going to get more candidates until some of this stuff changes. And I don't believe that and I know what, we've got the statistics here. Many communities have lowered it. I've always prided ourselves on our standards, our high standards. And I just do not see where lowering our standard is going to make any difference at all. There's communities, pardon me, that are offering big bonuses. There's communities there's all sorts of incentives now. And quite frankly, I don't see where any of this is going to make that much or any part of a difference. I'm looking at the response. 1 out of 2 will not successfully complete the polygraph. That hasn't changed at all since I've been on the board. About half, 1 of 4 candidates don't pass the oral interview. That hasn't changed. That's consistent. Are we looking for quantity? Are we looking for quality? In my mind, I feel like we should keep our standard. And I would hope that, and I don't procedurally now, because I would support the other two parts of this ordinance, but I cannot and will not support lowering it from 75 to 70. I won't do it.
Thank you very much, Trustee Blair. Anyone else on this? Yes, please. Trustee
Mayor,
Martinez.
I concur with my fellow trustee. I was also part of the police board for 12 years, and I know what it was like 10 years ago and what it's like today for potential candidates. I do not believe lowering the score from 75 to 70 is going to create more opportunities for people to come in and take the test. I mean, I know that we just got 54. I remember we had 320. And granted, out of 320, maybe, if lucky, 70 of those went through. But I guess I have a question, excuse me, for the chief. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I guess indirectly I am. Out of the potential changes that I recommend, do you really believe that that's going to create more interest in people pursuing a police position in Woodridge? And secondly, maintaining the high level of performance that this police department has had over the years that I lived here, 48 years.
First off, I'd like to thank you for your support and your comments, both Mary Ann Blair and Mike Martinez. Your support for the police department has been unending, and I really, really appreciate it. And I just want to say that the HR director, myself, Maureen, have worked very hard to look at every option that we can to increase our availability to hire officers. I think this is a very, very critical recruitment cycle for us for several reasons. We're looking at several people on the department that's going to retire, right? We're looking at some officers that are being highly recruited at other agencies, particularly out of state. We've had officers leave. And you can ask the group when we had a break here. I was out recruiting in the hallway, trying to get people to take our test. So it is a constant thing for both myself and Maureen. Everywhere I go, I ask people if they want to be a police officer. And it's concerning to me what happened, what people think of the police profession at this point. And it's something I think about all the time. It keeps me up at night worrying about it. I do know that I look at the written test as one portion of a large kind of process that we go through. And I'm pretty confident, very confident actually, that our FTOs and our officers only pick the best people. And that bears out in some of the statistics that we have. In the last 10 people that have been hired on entry-level process, 7 have passed and they're still with us. I'm sorry, 7 have passed, 3 didn't make it. And those 3 that didn't make it are actually working for other police agencies. So that in itself, and I know I was very involved in those officers, and they're good officers now, but they just didn't fit into the Woodridge scheme of things, and we knew that we moved on from there. And of those 7 that did make it, 2 have already left. So that left us with 5 of the last 10. So it's something I'm worried about. I'm worried about that one that stone that's unturned, right? Is there an opportunity? Is there one person there or 2 people there that maybe they don't do good on the written test, but on the other parts of it, they're doing good. So those are the things that both Maureen and I think about all the time to try to increase our ability to hire qualified people. So, but I do understand what both of you are saying.
But the point is, I can see if we eliminate the fee, that may be an opportunity. But the test or the interview, that's after the fact. You still need to attract the people to come in and apply for the position.
Right.
And I don't believe lowering the score from 75 to 70 will make that. I agree with the other 2 changes.
Understood.
Any further discussion from any board members?
Yes, Chief, if I may, Madam Mayor. Do you have any statistics from prior recruiting classes to say we would have had X number of people that would have made it at 70% that did not make it at 75.
I know from our last test that nobody would have qualified. We didn't have anybody in that range from 70 to 75. The previous test, maybe Maureen might know. Our last testing process was in 2019. Like I said, there was nobody that qualified. In 2017, 5 scored between 70 and 75. In 2015, 6 scored between 70 and 75. In 2013, 34 scored between 70 and 75. And in 2011, 19 scored between 70 and 75.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? How many took the test on each one of those?
In 2019, 54 people took the test. That's where we didn't have anybody in that range, the 0. In 2017, 156 people took the test. 5 people scored in the range of 70 to 75. In 2015, 219 people took the test. We had 6 in the range. 2013, we had 308 and 34 scored in the range. And in 2011, we had 175 that took the test and 19 scored in the range.
Okay, and that number on the test, it's a hard number. There's no, you either are 75 or above right now, or you do not go on.
That's correct.
Okay, and how many other towns have lowered their standard, the test score to 70?
As far as lowered, us and Bolingbrook are the only ones that are solid 75. There's a couple towns that kind of gauge it depending on how many people actually take the test. Then they'll decide whether it's 70 and 75. So there's only 2 in our area that IO Solutions is testing for that are at 75.
And it's my understanding that we need to give you an answer tonight for the next recruiting class because you're up against a clock.
We're definitely getting up against a clock. We want to move forward with the process. I don't think it has to be decided tonight, but we do want to move forward with that process.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Please,
Chief, have you ever done any kind of analysis to see, you know, when an officer's in his 5th, 6th, 8th year, like how good he is at his job and how it correlates to test scores? And again, I realize that could be some pretty intense analysis, and maybe you didn't do it. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, but I was just wondering if you had anything on that.
As far as that, in the early career, I do. Like in that first year, you wonder, okay, how does that relate to the scoring? But like I said, the written portion is important, right? But it's a starting point. Really, I really rely on the interviews, which the BOPC is part of. I really like the fact that part of our process is they have to ride along with an officer. And as soon as they're done with that ride along, I ask that officer, and usually those officers are right on as far as, is this somebody that we need to move forward with? You know, they take a psychological, they take the polygraph, and then the background is really the thing that kind of, I really lean on. The background investigators for our department do an excellent job.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? I do have a question, either Chief or Maureen. I know we saw a sample test. How many questions are on the actual test? Is this pretty close, or?
I know that IO Solutions has 80 question test.
Okay.
And I know some of the things that they actually test for are verbal comprehension, verbal expression, problem sensitivity, deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, information gathering, and spatial orientation. I have a practice, and it actually worked out the last 2 tests where I actually talk to everybody that takes our tests. They sit in the rounds, you know, at Bobex at the banquet. And I get there early and I sit down with everybody and I ask them how many tests they've taken, what kind of tests they've taken, where they struggle with the testing process. And most everybody tells me that has struggled. They struggle with the spatial orientation. And that's basically a test that determines if you know where your location is in an area, can you figure out mapping? And this plays out in our FTO process. The #1 problem we have with recruits, and it's every recruit, is they've been living in a Google Maps world, right? And now all of a sudden they got to figure out where they're going. They got to find the cul-de-sac on the south end of town. And that's that part of testing process that everybody says they struggle with. And we see it bears out in the FTO process as well. So we spend a lot of time working with people in that area.
So can you quantify for me, either yourself or Maureen, because this recommendation came from the Board of Police Commissioners. Sure. So I'm just trying to follow up, and I've tried to learn as much as I can, not having the same experience that Trustee Blair and Trustee Martinez have directly. Can we quantify what, are we talking a question, or is it?
I can take that one. Yeah, so on an 80 question test, this is probably a question that I would miss if I was taking the test, but if you got 60 right, you'd be at 75%, and 70% would be 56. So it's a four question difference.
4 questions. And then I looked at the survey that was performed on the area communities right around us here. So roughly 21 communities responded to our written test score survey that we did. And there's one community that actually has gone, and it's a large community, to a lower, so a 65%. Is that recent, or?
Yeah, I know Maureen had reached out on that one. Schaumburg, yeah.
And it's recent? So out of the roughly 21 or so communities on here, we have 2, Woodridge and Bolingbrook, that are at 75. And the remainder, have they recently changed to 70, or is that something do we know? Have they been at 70 for a while? Or?
I don't know the exact dates, but I think most of them have been at 70 for a while.
Okay. So. And when did we change ours? When was the last time we changed? 2010. And weren't we at 70 at that point? I'm sorry. Thank you, Maureen.
Thanks, Maureen.
So I believe we changed between 2011 and 2012. In that time frame, we went from 70% to 75%.
Trying to get as much information as I can, so thank you. So this was a recommendation, though, made by the Board of Police Commissioners after evaluating recent experiences we've had, similar to other communities as well, in the applicants that we're receiving. We've definitely seen a sharp decline.
Absolutely.
For many reasons, as Trustee Blair mentioned earlier. What kind of impact specifically are we possibly going to see if we've got people retiring and we're not able to hire?
Yeah, we're definitely going to see some retirements in the near future. The recruitment thing, and our officers are being recruited. We have great officers, and there's a lot of communities that would like to have them, just as we have taken officers from other communities. It's changed tremendously in the last 5 years. So we're looking at those kind of issues. Right now, we had somebody who left for another state a couple weeks ago. That officer was in a specialty position. We haven't been able to refill that specialty position because personnel levels won't allow for it at this point.
So we're directly feeling the impact of.
Yeah, when we lose somebody, there's a direct impact, definitely. And with entry level employees, 8 to 9 months academy, you go through the FTO process. So, we have to project this out for a year and see where we're at. And the unknown is a little bit scary at times.
Because I definitely would have to say, prior to really looking at this and researching it, and when we were interviewing for the Board of Police Commissioners, I think you asked every candidate how they would help or any ideas they had on recruiting. Yeah. So it was clear that this is something at, top of mind. And it ended up top of my mind after that as well. I don't have anything else. I don't know if anyone else does. Just want to do a last. Yes, Trustee
Mayor,
Martinez?
I think if we were to lower it from 75 to 70, and let's say that it adds an additional 6 people, I'm just picking a number. You're passing the burden a little bit to the Board of Police Commissioners interview, because that's a very critical aspect of hiring the police. And if they don't pass that interview, and I remember sitting in many interviews where the people had 90%, and an hour later, said, what is that person doing here? He doesn't belong applying for police. So I think, obviously, I'm a little hesitant to change to 70%, but I want to make sure that we understand that if we lower the score, trying to find more people, the Board of Police Commissioner is going to have a little larger burden on their shoulders to make sure that they select the right people. And then the other thing is, I don't know how well we're doing lateral hiring, and any interest parties from other communities that may want to come to work.
Yeah, I can answer that. We're in the process, hopefully. I talked to both of them last night. They both agreed to start in July, 2 officers from Chicago on the lateral, and we're doing a background for another officer from Chicago. So just like the other, areas, we're trying to grab people from wherever we can.
And one last point here is, which is probably going to not sit well with some of my fellow trustees, but again, having sat on the board and know the difficulties you face keeping the number of police officers in place, assuming that the count that we'll have approved is 51, I don't know what it is, 50, 51, 52. Maybe we should be looking at hiring an extra police officer just to make sure that we are safe going forward with unexpected retirements or relocations that we didn't anticipate.
I think that's an awesome point.
I have a couple questions. Are we at a full complement right now? And if not, how many are we down?
We're 2 officers down.
You're 2 officers down. You have 2 in the process,
Yes.
correct? And the list is exhausted?
Yes.
The current list is exhausted, and we're going to start a new process coming up.
Right. Yes.
Are you done? Okay. Chief or Maureen, maybe both of you. I'm not trying to put you on the spot at all, but I'm going to ask you your professional guidance here for those of us that have never been part of the Board of Police Commissioners or been part of the interview process and hiring. You don't want to answer, I understand, but I would just ask that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I think it might be helpful for those of us that have never been part of that.
Sure. You want to go first, Maureen?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I could talk a little personal, like what I look for in a police candidate. I'm looking for somebody who has integrity. I'm looking for somebody who's service oriented. I want somebody who's empathetic. I want somebody who's a great communicator. I want somebody who has self-control. I want somebody who's a team player. I want somebody who has problem-solving skills and somebody who's got a lot of common sense. And in the entire process, that's what I'm looking for. Like when I talked about when they first arrive, I do that quick kind of assessment. It's kind of like a speed dating thing for me. I want to talk to them right away, see where they're at, and engage them. And then as the process goes through, I'm always asking, are we verifying that this is the person that has these qualities? The written test is important to me, but sometimes that number doesn't mean that they have these qualities. That's what I'm looking for in every one of our applicants.
Thank you, Chief. Maureen?
From an HR perspective, I just want to give as many people a chance to stay in the process, not eliminate people before we've given them a fair chance. And I think for all of our recruitments, we have to look at different ways to approach how we get people on board.
Thank you very much. Thank you. For me, that's very helpful. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. So before us this evening, we do have ordinance 2021-20. Going to ask for a motion to approve that ordinance.
I make the motion to approve it with amending it to keeping the score at 75.
Okay, thank you very much.
Before there's a second, just so we have clarification, Trustee Blair, in the proposed rules, in both phase 1 and phase 2, phase 1 being the written exam, phase 2 being the oral exam, there is a proposed 70% average score as minimum passing. Am I correct in assuming that you want both of those to be revised to be
To stay at 75.
75%?
Yes.
All right, then again, just to make sure that the record's clear, so your motion is correctly stated. What you're proposing is amending the proposed ordinance in section 2 so that after the word adopted at the end, instead of a period, there's a comma, and we add the additional language with the following amendment, in chapter 3, section 6, the minimum passing grade in phase 1, that's Roman numeral 1, and phase Roman numeral 2, examinations shall be 75%.
Yeah.
Does that accurately reflect your proposed amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Now you need a second.
Right. I'm going to ask a second to the amendment.
To the motion with the amendment.
75% for written and oral.
Correct.
So before us, we have an amended ordinance as stated, 75% instead of 70 as proposed by the Board of Police Commissioners. Asking for a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Martinez. Any further discussion on this item?
Point of clarification. So a vote, this is voting simply on whether we agree to amend the resolution. Am I correct?
It's approving the ordinance, which the ordinance approves the rules and regs with the amendment to the rules and regs changing from 75 to 70.
But if I disagree with Trustee Blair's suggested changes.
So the motion
I like it as written.
Okay. So the motion that's on the floor is not as written. So you would vote no, and if that motion fails, then of course you can make a separate motion to approve as written.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Going to ask our clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Abbott?
Nay.
Trustee Krusek?
Nay.
Trustee Martinez?
Aye.
Trustee Blair?
Aye.
Trustee Kagan?
Nay.
Motion fails.
Yes, because you need 4 affirmative votes. Even if the mayor were to vote, there wouldn't be 4 affirmative votes. As such, the motion does fail. Thank you, Claire.
Yeah, I got that right.
Let me just clarify for everyone and all of our neighbors exactly where are we at on this.
So the motion with the proposed amendment to the rules and regs did not pass. Now, if someone wants to make a motion to approve ordinance 2021-20 as written, that's certainly a motion that can be made.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 2021-20 as presented in red.
Thank you very much, Trustee Kagan. Going to ask for a second on ordinance 2021-20 as written.
Second, Trustee Abbott.
Thank you, Trustee Abbott. Any discussion on this item? Or further discussion? Okay, going to ask our clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Abbott?
Aye.
Trustee Krusek?
Aye.
Trustee Martinez?
Nay.
Trustee Blair?
Nay.
Trustee Kagan?
Aye.
And now the mayor has to vote.
Okay.
Call the mayor.
Mayor Cunningham?
Going to vote aye.
Okay. Motion carries. Original motion.
Thank you very much. If I could just make a statement, I tremendously appreciate the diligence and excellence that you had in your statements, because I know the years that both of you have dedicated to our Board of Police Commissioners. And this is not easy, so I hope you understand that, but I thank you both very much. Okay, thank you.
Next, item D is Resolution 2021-61. It's a resolution approving a one-year extension of the joint bid 2019-23 for the villages of Lombard, Wheeling, Woodridge, and DuPage County for sidewalk saw cutting with the company Hard Rock Concrete Cutters, Inc. for the 2021 season. This would be at a unit cost of $54.57 for sidewalk repairs in the village of Woodridge. We estimate about 200 point repairs at an estimated cost of $10,914.
Thank you very much. Going to ask for a motion to approve resolution 2021-61, please.
So moved, Trustee Krusek.
Thank you, Trustee Krusek. And a second, please.
Second, Trustee Blair.
Thank you, Trustee Blair. Any discussion on this item? Seeing no one, I'm going to ask our clerk to please call the roll.
Trustee Krusek.
Aye.
Trustee Martinez.
Aye.
Trustee Blair.
Aye.
Trustee Kagan. Aye. Trustee Abbott.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Next, item E is Resolution 2021-62. It's a resolution to adopt the fiscal year 2017 annual financial reports for Seven Bridges Golf Club, covering for calendar year ending December 31st, 2017.
If I could please ask for a motion to approve resolution 2021-62.
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Martinez. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Krusek. Any discussion on this item? If our clerk would please call the roll.
Trustee Martinez.
Aye.
Trustee Blair.
Aye.
Trustee Kagan.
Aye.
Trustee Abbott.
Aye.
Trustee Krusek.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Next, item F is Resolution 2021-63. It's a resolution to adopt the annual financial reports for the village, the library, inclusive of the auditor's management letter, the mayor and board of trustees for calendar year ending December 31st, 2020. And our finance team is here to present the audit results. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Board. Myself and Mr. Brad Porter from Lauterbach and Amon are here tonight to present the 2020 audit. So tonight we will provide a few highlights from the audit, and I'll also discuss the general fund and the water and sewer funds financial position, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Porter to present Lauterbach and Amon's portion of the audit on the audit process and their audit opinion. But first and foremost, I would like, on behalf of the finance team, I'd like to express our gratitude to the other village departments for their assistance with the 2020 audit. It's truly a collaborative effort, and we would not be here making the deadline without them. Also, I'd like to express my personal gratitude to Linda Dalton, Nadine Aletto, and Darren Clary from the finance team for all their assistance with this year's audit. And lastly, to Mr. Porter and his staff at Lauterbach and Amon. This was my first audit this year, and they were very patient and understanding. So with that, we are very pleased to announce that the village received a clean audit this year. And this is reflective of the village's commitment to internal controls and our effective financial processes. And you have a lot of audit documents in front of you tonight. For your time, being conscious of your time, we'd like to recommend, if you want to focus on the management discussion and analysis portion, that'll give you a good overview of the village finances. And then the statistical section, which is in the back of the audit, that'll give you a good overview of the village economic position. And those two documents combined should give you a good overview of the 2020 audit.
Thank you very much, Tracy.
Looking at the financial position, focusing on the general fund, we have some budget variances here we'd like to cover. I'm happy to announce that for 2020, our revenues were actually 2% above budget. I don't think a year ago we thought we'd be saying this. And that's primarily due to the 1.8 million in of the CARES Act funding that you see there under federal grants. That's our largest variance this year. Also, use tax was about $400,000 over budget. And that's due to the change in consumer behavior during the pandemic, switching to online sales, which we also see reflected under sales tax. Sales tax came in 23% under budget. And that's due to all the business closings due to COVID and all the impact to our restaurants as well. Now, looking at expenses, we have some variances here in the community development department. They were $270,000 under budget. They have some positions that are unfilled, including senior planner and building inspector. Rebates also came in $200,000 under budget due to poor sales tax performance. And then the legislative department came in slightly over budget, and that's due to the COVID restaurant relief program. And then, as you'll recall, staff implemented over $800,000 in budget cuts in response to COVID, and that's reflected in our total expense for 2020. That came in 3% or $760,000 below budget. So looking at this in terms of our fund balance, this year we provided 2 fund balance scenarios for you. The one on the left in orange is our actual fund balance. And then on one on the right, we wanted to take a look at where our fund balance would be without our CARES Act funding. So for 2020, we ended the year with a fund balance of $21.1 million, which is just a decrease of $185,000, much better than where we thought we would be, which leaves us with a fund balance percentage of 72%. And then without our CARES Act funding, we would expect to end the year around $19.3 million in fund balance in the general fund, which leaves us with a fund balance of about 45%. And so while those are above our 25% fund balance requirement, during our most recent bond ratings call with Moody's, they did express some concern over our declining fund balance. And so we were able to defend that, saying there were planned spend downs and reserves, but we know that this practice isn't sustainable for the long term. And then looking at the water fund, we have some variances here, primarily in water sales. This was 4% higher than budget, which was nice to see because this fund water sales have been trending about 2% lower each year. And then water bill penalties, we know is under budget because we suspended water shutoffs for a portion of the year because of the pandemic. And then in expenses, we came in $3 million below budget, and that's primarily due to some capital projects that were rolled over. So looking at the water and sewer fund balance, we ended the year with an unrestricted net position, also known as fund balance, of $9.2 million, which is a 21% increase over 2019. And while it does look like we have some nice growth here, we also have some growth in our capital needs, as we've discussed. For 2021, we have over $5 million in capital projects budgeted. 2022 to over $2 million. So just keep that in mind when you look at this fund balance. So that concludes the villages portion. Did you have any questions before I turn it over to Lauterbach and Amon?
Thank you very much, Tracy. We appreciate the excellent presentation. I'm going to ask any board members any questions at this time. Okay, thank you very much.
And this is Mr. Porter, our audit manager from Lauterbach and Amon.
Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Brad Porter. I'm here on behalf of Lauterbach and Amon as the audit manager for the village to present to you the fiscal year 2020 audit from an auditor's perspective. First and foremost, Tracy did a tremendous job recapping the financials there. So I will stick to a lot of the intangibles related to the audit process throughout my presentation. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this evening. It was great to dust the suit off and get to an in-person meeting. So, and before I go any further, I'd certainly like to start my presentation by thanking those that played an integral role in this audit process, 3 of whom are in this room here this evening. Nadine, Darren, and Tracy, we really appreciate all of the proactive communication that we have throughout the course of the audit process. It makes that audit process seem to be a well-oiled machine by the time the timing comes around. So we really appreciate all of your efforts. All right, so up on the screen here, I've just got a couple key highlights pertaining to the fiscal year 2020 audit, which Tracy had, stole my thunder on a couple of these, but that's okay. First and foremost, the village has received a clean audit opinion for fiscal year 2020. We call a clean audit opinion in the governmental world an unmodified opinion. So I'll kind of talk about what that means here shortly. The village also was the recipient of the Certificate of Achievement Award for Financial Reporting Excellence. You'll notice the date there on the slide is 12/31/2019. These awards are always reported 1 year in arrears, as we'll be working with staff on the application for the fiscal year 2020 program as well. A couple of new items for fiscal year 2020, one of which is what we call a single audit. You will find that document in your board packet. The village has not had a single audit in quite some time. Ultimately, a single audit is required anytime an entity expends more than $750,000 of federal grant funding. And due to the $1.8 million of CARES funding this year, that did trigger the need for that single audit. Really, the contents of that report are simply a schedule of what your federal expenditures are and an opinion from our perspective on internal controls over grant reporting. There was one management letter finding that we did identify during the single audit process, which it's my interpretation of, I didn't even get a chance to talk about it before the village implemented this policy. So this was related to a grants policy, which simply deals with the grant administration process. It is my interpretation that that policy was implemented at the June meeting, so we don't have much to talk about on that front. I think that also goes to show just the sincerity of this audit process by staff. It says a lot that we made a recommendation, and before the audit was even finalized, that policy was in the works and implemented at the following meeting. So here's an image of that Certificate of Achievement Award for fiscal year 2019. Really, I just wanted to point out that this truly is an accomplishment. Not every municipality in our area applies and receives this award, and there's a significant time burden that's placed on staff in order to meet the compliance requirements of this program. You'll notice in your audit document a transmittal letter and a statistical section. Those are really the two big portions that distinguish an annual financial report from a comprehensive annual financial report. Moving on, here is an excerpt from our independent auditor's report, which can be found on pages 10 through 12. You'll notice that first statement in our opinions paragraph, we state that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the village. It is worth noting too that we do conduct a number of internal control walkthroughs of the different functions of the village: cash receipting, cash disbursements, payroll, et cetera, for the sake of generating this opinion, and we had no internal control weaknesses or deficiencies that we had identified. Moving on, I do want to stress the importance of the MD&A section, as we call it. That stands for Management's Discussion and Analysis, which can be found on pages 13 through 27. Up on the screen, we do have some financial highlights that Tracy covered throughout her portion of the presentation. But if you are going to focus your time and energy on one section of the audit report, I would certainly encourage it to be this section here. We are the first to understand that the financial statements themselves are not the most easily interpretable by any means, even for us as accountants sometimes. So I do encourage you to read through the MD&A section. You'll get a great analysis of comparable data from one year to the next. In the MD&A section, I did want to point out up on the screen here, we've got two pie graphs, one of which is for fiscal year 2020. The other is the previous year, fiscal year 2019. And these pie graphs represent your revenues by source for your governmental activities. There's one key number that changed on this pie graph from the previous fiscal year to this one, and that is the significant increase in your capital grants and contributions, going from less than 1% of your total revenues in the prior year to 20%. So as Tracy had alluded to, that does relate to your CARES funding. Another very, very important section for you as a board to familiarize yourself with would be what we call our statistical section. That can be found on pages 146 through 168. This is going to be your section that you'll go to for a lot of your 10-year trends, property tax, debt information, some of your economic and demographic related information. So I would encourage you again to spend some energy here. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions, or my contact information is up on the screen. So always feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Porter. We appreciate the presentation. I'm going to ask my fellow board members, anyone have any questions at this time?
Great.
Very much.
Thank you
We
very much.
appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So we have before us resolution 2021-63. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve this resolution.
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Krusek. And a second, please.
Trustee Kagan.
Thank you, Trustee Kagan. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, if our clerk would please call the roll.
Trustee Martinez.
Aye.
Trustee Blair.
Aye.
Trustee Kagan.
Aye.
Trustee Abbott.
Aye.
Trustee Krusek.
Aye.
Motion passes.
On behalf of the village board and our entire village, we wish to thank our excellent and very diligent finance department and the representatives here that did a wonderful presentation. Tracy, Darren, our finance director, Aletto over there in the corner, Nadine, and the entire finance team. Great job. Thank you so much for an excellent report and presentation and audit.
Last item this evening, Mayor, is Resolution 2021-64. It's a resolution authorizing the village administrator to execute a letter of engagement between the Village of Woodridge, Illinois, and the Soto's Law Firm.
If I could please have a motion to approve Resolution 2021-64.
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Blair. And a second, please.
Second, Trustee Kagan.
Thank you, Trustee Kagan. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, if our clerk would please call the roll.
Trustee Blair.
Aye.
Trustee Kagan.
Aye.
Trustee Abbott.
Nay.
Trustee Krusek.
Aye.
Trustee Martinez.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much, everyone. There's no further active agenda items or unfinished or new business to come before the board.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, please.
just a quick comment. I don't know how we ever did a board meeting without our little computer screens here. These are the best.
They are.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. They are. I mean, I was really surprised. They're wonderful to have. So
Even Trustee Abbott likes this expenditure.
It's rare, but it does happen.
let's make sure we highlight that somewhere in the future. To all of our Woodridge dads, happy Father's Day coming up this weekend. We hope that everyone, you especially dads, has a wonderful celebratory weekend. And please stay safe. And as you're talking to your neighbors and out and about throughout Woodridge, if you would please share about our upcoming Blue Light Blue Ribbon Week. And with no further business to come before the village board this evening, I would ask for a motion to adjourn this regular board meeting of the village board.
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Krusek. And a second? Second. Thank you, Trustee Blair. All those in favor, please sign aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries, and this meeting is adjourned at 9:45 p.m. Thank you very much and have a great evening.